or junior college, demystifying the college process. I appreciate you coming out on this Wednesday night and spending some time with us to talk about everything regarding the college process. My name is John Klassen. I'm the Director of College Counseling here at Glenbrook South. This is my 15th year at Glenbrook South, third year in the role of Director of College Counseling. Prior to coming to Glenbrook South, I was at Lake Forest College in the Office of Admissions there. So I have experience on both sides of the desk that I like to draw upon when working with our students here at Glenbrook South. I have a passion for what I do because I was a first-generation college student. So I had very little guidance when I began this journey. And so I certainly sympathize with those of you in the audience that maybe this is the first time that you're starting this journey with your son or daughter. And I realize that everybody in the audience may be at different spots in this journey. But I think that you'll find the program tonight to be very comprehensive as we talk about a variety of different factors that are involved in this process. But before we start with the formal part of the presentation, we have a little bit of fun here with what we like to call the college admissions game. So we've selected 7 participants in the audience to come up here and compete for the highly coveted top school entry in terms of admissions. So we're going to read out a couple of different phrases, and then our applicants are going to walk forward and backwards based on if they're positively affected or negatively affected by the particular statement. I'm going to make some comments about some of those as we talk about this college admissions game. So we're going to start, and you can see that everybody has a different GPA there, so feel free to pick your horse who you think is going to make it to the front here and earn the coveted prize of the Ivory Tower. So number 1, if you've taken an exceptionally strong academic program, move up 2 spaces. And please be careful up here. This was we have some small steps. We might have to walk down the risers. So certainly as we talk about a strong academic program, I'll talk about this a little bit more as the program gets started. Very important to have a strong academic program. Number 2, if you clearly stated that this college is your first choice by making an early decision application and commitment, move up 2 spaces. So early decisions, we have no early decisions up there. So early decision, some of you may or may not be familiar with early decision. It's a binding contract that you're entering with the school. You're basically telling that school that if you get in, you will withdraw all of your other applications. Why do people decide to go early decision? Well, number 1, they go early decision because they identified the particular school after doing a lot of research that that's the number 1 school that they want to go to. Now, there are other benefits of going early decision. So if you read articles, do some research on early decision, certainly the application, the admission percentages are higher for those students typically who are going to apply early decision. Sometimes it's as much as double the average admission rate for the regular decision candidates. So there can be some benefits to that. And I would encourage you, if it's something that you are thinking about and you started the process early enough, if that's something that you want to do, to have a conversation with myself or to have a conversation with your son or daughter's counselor to think about if that's right for you. But there certainly can be some benefits to doing that. Number 3, if you do not know any of your teachers well enough to feel comfortable asking for a letter of recommendation, move back 2 spaces. Okay, so certainly we'll talk about the letter of recommendation process again in the program, but a very important part of the application process. Number 4, if you submitted your college essay and you forgot to change the name of the college you're applying to, move back 3 spaces. That was pretty self-explanatory. Number 5, if you're a legacy, move up 2 spaces. So primary legacies can certainly, I was reading an article the other day that said that, they have some primary legacies have up to a 45% statistical advantage over other students who are applying. And so sometimes when you're looking at statistics in terms of students that got in and students that didn't get in, that primary legacy piece can sometimes have to be very, very impactful. Number 6, if you do not write the optional college essay, move back 1 space. So in terms of the application process, we always say that if it's recommended, consider it required. So students look at what's asked in the application. For example, Northwestern asked for, or or recommends SAT 2s. But we tell our students, if you're going to apply to Northwestern, Northwestern would like to see that you're doing everything that they're asking in the application. So they would like you to take those SAT 2s. Are they recommended? Yes. Okay. You don't have to do them, but Northwestern would say that we highly recommend that you do that. So as you start to read those application procedures, anything that's recommended should still probably be required. Number 7, if the topic of your essay was sports as a metaphor for life, move back one space. So as we start to talk about writing that big college essay, we want to try to stay away from some of those essays that are constantly repeated, that college admission officers are going to see over and over again. We want to stay away from some of those tired essays. Number 8, if you visited the college, had an alumni interview, filled out the questionnaires on the college website, move up one space. So this is called demonstrated interest, and this is a real big buzzword as of late. A lot of schools are going to track demonstrated interest. And you can show demonstrated interest in a variety of different ways. By visiting a campus. We have over 200 college reps that come here and visit us in the fall. That's a great opportunity for our students, and I always encourage our students when we meet with them, that they should make an appointment with those reps if possible. Sometimes they have to miss a class. But they should make the effort to meet with those reps. That's a form of demonstrated interest. Oftentimes, those representatives that come to our school are the same representatives that are going to be reading those applications once your son or daughter submits those applications. So I really encourage them to reach out to those representatives. College fairs. That's another great opportunity. The representatives that work the college fairs to go up, have a conversation with those college representatives. Interviews is another great way to show demonstrated interest. Opening up your email. A lot of these schools now are hiring companies to mine some of that data. So when they send a student an email, they can see whether or not students open up some of those emails. Another form of demonstrated interest. So it's out there, and it's an important part of the process because schools are concerned with yield. So they're concerned with, if we admit a student, is that student going to come? There's all kinds of things from bond issues tied to yield to rate rankings. So when you open up the U.S. News and World Report and you look down and you look at those schools that are ranked highly, those are tied also to yield rates. And so demonstrated interest for a lot of schools becomes very important. You get asked at school, do you track demonstrated interest? And many schools will be very open about that and let you know that they track demonstrated interest. Some also might say they don't track demonstrated interest, and sometimes I wonder if that's really true on the back end. I think a lot of schools in some way are tracking that demonstrated interest. So very, very important. Number 9, if you'll be the first in your family to attend college, please move up 2 spaces. So we call this first generation students, and there's a lot of colleges and universities out there that want to attract those first generation students to give them an opportunity to experience college. So again, that can be certainly an advantage in the admissions process. Number 10, if you do not participate in any extracurricular activities, move back 3 spaces. So certainly schools want that well-rounded student, right? They want that student that's not only great in school, but also involved in the other things that the school has to offer. Number 11, if you participated in a significant community service project, move up 1 space. So again, as we look at that involvement, not only with the school, but also out in the community. 12, if you wrote a letter to the college admission officer to explain an extenuating circumstance surrounding a D grade, move up 1 space. We talk to our juniors all the time about the fact that they may have a blip in their grades. And if there's an extenuating circumstance behind that, they need to explain that. Now, the expectation would be, after that blip, then the grades come back up. The expectation would be, after that blip, the academics haven't dropped, so in other words, they're not taking less of an academic schedule while suddenly the grades come back up, but that they would continue to have a rigorous program and then come back up and do very well. So those can be easily explained. I know I have students all the time come into my office and they're worried about the fact that maybe they have a concussion, or maybe there was an illness in the family, or there was other extenuating circumstances that affected their grades. that can easily be explained in a counselor letter of recommendation to a school. But again, the student has to show that, that was just a minor blip, and then certainly make that change the next semester. If you have an on-fire video of your pre-prom party posted on YouTube under your name, move down 2 spaces. Again, pretty self-explanatory. 14, if you apply early decision or single choice action to more than one college, you're on the game. We have somebody out at port 3.5. I bet you somebody, so if you want to just exit over here and give Miss McBride, unfortunately, you're not going to be in the every tower. If you got caught drinking at campus overnight on an overnight visit, you're out. 3.5, having too much fun. Number 16, College X receives a deposit from you that was made out to College Y. And when College X calls College Y and learns that it also had received a deposit from you, but made out to College X, you're out. That's called double depositing. And that's highly discouraged to deposit at 2 schools. Pick one school and decide on that school. Okay, we've got 4 left. Some pretty high GPAs up there. If the name of the college library is the same as your last name, and it's not a coincidence, move all the way to the front and stay there. Mr. 2 point. Let's give Mr. 2 point. Let's give all of our contestants a hand. Thank you very much. So I like to play this game, and certainly there's some great nuggets in there that we can talk about in terms of the college process. And, certainly while we can't completely demystify the college admissions decisions, again, it's my hope that we can demystify this college process tonight for you as we talk about a variety of different things regarding the college process. It is important to note, as we start to think about the college admission piece, and I think as we go through this game, I think sometimes for students it's really hard because our students at Glenbrook South do great things. We're working with great kids every day. It's one of the reasons I absolutely love Glenbrook South. But I think the hard part is sometimes our students can do everything in their power to put themselves in positions to apply to schools and be very strong applicants, but yet they don't get it. And that's because there's all of these different factors. And when we talk about even the game that we're playing today, institutional priorities, unfortunately, are something that we're not privy to. We don't sit in those offices at the beginning of the year at some of these schools. And certainly the more selective the school is, the more selective they can be in terms of building those classes. I think that sometimes can be a really frustrating thing for our students. When again, they've done everything that they could possibly do to meet the standards of that school, but sometimes they don't do it. And sometimes, unfortunately, it might be the first time that they fail in life. They've been very successful throughout their life, and it's the first time that they failed in life. And unfortunately, sometimes these students really think that it has something to do then with their ability to do the work at these types of schools, which is really false. Because our top students can do the work at any of the schools in this country. And so I think it's important as parents and it's important as a college counselor that we help our students through this process so that we start early and we research and that we're applying to appropriate schools. And so that's what I want to help you with tonight as we kind of walk through this PowerPoint. The first thing I want to show you is this is a college counseling news from the class of 2016. And you can see that our students apply to a variety of different schools throughout the country and internationally. We have students playing and competing in collegiate level athletics. But the thing I really want to point out, if you take a look at the number of colleges that our students have applied to, it's important for you to notice that number. That number has not changed for as long as I've been at Glenbrook South, and that's been 15 years. That's our historical average. And I know sometimes you hear in the media, or you might hear when you talk to other people about students applying to 20, 30 schools. That's not the average. And my recommendation is that students should really apply to 6 to 8 college, and I will, as we go through this PowerPoint, tell you why I think that's a really good number. Now, might students apply to 10 or 12? Sure. And I would have those specific conversations. But as a general rule, I think 6 to 8 schools is a very appropriate number of schools to apply to. It is really important that you start the process now, which is why we had this parent night tonight, which is why I met with the juniors last week, so that we're starting to think about this process, to give yourself some time to do the research. And really, at this point, we'll talk a little bit about timeline in just a minute. I want to just show you our top 10 schools for the class of 2016. One thing that you'll notice here is you'll notice a very heavy Midwest influence. About 78% of our students do stay in the Midwest when it comes time to choose a college or university. But as we look at the timeline, I think this is a great snapshot of the things that you should be doing. And some of you are probably already doing this now. But really, as we start to get this process going, this is a great time to start identifying potential schools. And then later in the PowerPoint, I'll talk about some criteria that you might use to identify that list. But this is why I'm here. This is why our counselors are here. We're here to help you start to build that list that's appropriate for you, that's appropriate for your son or daughter in terms of the parameters that you have talked about. It's also a time that you start thinking about taking standardized tests, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the presentation. I know there'll be some questions about that. It's a great time to start visiting those colleges and researching those colleges and meeting with your counselor to discuss those post-secondary plans. Then as we start to move into that senior year, we start to narrow that list. And it's important to be able to narrow that list because there's a lot of work on the other end. If you have 30 schools that you're applying to, I can guarantee you that your son or daughter is going to be stressed out in September or October of next year. But if they do this process correctly, they'll have a much better situation. Here's some additional programs that we have coming up, and I'm not going to spend time talking about each of these. These are on our website, so if you go to the College and Career website, you can see all the things that are coming up. Counselors are going to meet with the juniors in February to do those Naviance groups. I do want to point out one in particular. That's our college colloquium. That's going to be March 4th. It's the first time that we're doing this. This is a district-wide program that we're going to put on with Glenbrook North. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite college professionals from all over the country to come here and speak on a variety of different topics. So we'll have the Dean of Enrollment from Case Western is going to talk about institutional priorities, and again, he's going to talk about demonstrated interest. We will have someone here to talk about the differences between big and small schools. We'll have someone here, we'll have several representatives from SEC schools. A lot of our students are starting to look south, and so we're going to have some representatives talk about some of the benefits of the SEC schools. We'll have a representative talk about performing art schools and what you need to do in terms of portfolios. We're also going to have a professional here from the University of Chicago that will go over case studies. I think will be fantastic. They'll actually show you why students got in and why some students didn't get in. So I would really advise you to put this down on your calendar now. Make sure that you can be here. We're doing it on a Saturday. I know that in the past, some parents have said, can we do something other than during the week, something on the weekend when the parent works during the night, that they can be here for this program. So it's going to be from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. The program will finish with our junior finance night. So at the end of that, we'll have a financial aid session from a representative from St. Xavier's. So again, you can see all the other things that we do with our students to walk them through this process. So I want you to know that there's a lot of resources here at Glenbrook South to help them through this process. So what are colleges really looking for? This really is an order of what schools are looking for. Okay, again, we're demystifying this process for you. Number one is transcript. And it is the most important thing that any student is going to submit to a college. In fact, in a recent report that I just read, when they asked about the importance of things, 80% of institutions reported the transcript as being of considerable importance in this process. Well, only 55.7% reported test scores. So again, the transcript is the most important thing. When I talked to the juniors last week, I told them that you should look at your transcript as a narrative that you're sending to these institutions. You unfortunately aren't going to have the opportunity to sit in that admission office and tap that admission person on the back and tell them what a great student you are, and tell them how hard you work. They're going to make an assessment by looking at that transcript. And they're going to decide whether or not you've taken risk during your 4 years at Glenbrook South. Have you pushed yourself? And that's what I talked to our juniors about. And again, pushing yourself is different for every student. For one student, that might be going from 3 academics to 4 academics. For another student, 4 to 5. For another student, it might be going from 5 academics to 5 academics the next year with 2 at the honors or AP level. That's different for every student. But taking risk is important. And I know a lot of students, they want to protect their GPAs. But sometimes that could be a detriment if they're not pushing themselves. So I really, really encourage them as they start to meet with their counselors in a couple months to think about what narrative do they want those college admission professionals to read. Test scores, I'm going to talk a little bit more about test scores in a minute. The student essay, letters of recommendation, and extracurricular activities are all the other things that schools are going to take into account as they look at admitting your son or daughter. Testing. So there's been some changes this year with testing in terms of the state. So the state has now mandated that all students will take the SAT. And I've had a lot of questions from parents about whether or not schools in Illinois are going to take the ACT as a standardized test exam. I've had questions about, are schools now going to prefer one over the other? Nothing has changed in terms of the way schools are going to look at standardized testing. And I know that the juniors are probably maybe in the toughest spot because we're making this change and the ACT has gone away with the planned test that students used to take, so there's a precursor to the ACT to give them some more familiarity, to take that ACT test. But when I took a poll of our juniors, I would say 3/4 of our juniors, when I asked this question, how many of you are primarily going to use the ACT as the test that you're going to submit as an entrance exam? About 3/4 of our students, or maybe more, said that's the route that they were going to go. And I get it, because most of those students have felt comfortable with maybe they had a brother or sister, or they've been prepping for the ACT before this decision by the state came out, and that is perfectly fine. What I stress to our juniors is I would be a little careful about straddling 2 different testing platforms. Because as you know, or if you're going to start to get into test prep and taking these tests, it takes a lot of time. And this is the junior year where it's already a tough curriculum. It's one of the most important years for the curriculum. And we already know, to go back to the other slide, that the transcript is the most important thing schools are going to look at. So to be very careful about where we're going to put our energies. And so that's one of the things that when I talked to our juniors last week, and I feel pretty strongly about this, I think pick a test and go with that test. Now, if it's the SAT, great. That's going to be offered in April. We'll have a date here at the school. And there's plenty of test prep options for SAT. If it's ACT, great. There's plenty of test prep options for ACT. If your son or daughter happens to take the state SAT and does really well on it, there's still time to prep for that and shift your attention to that and take that. And I'll show you the schedule here in a minute. And at the end of this, we'll have a question and answer session. So if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer any of those questions because I know that this has been a difficult time. Do you have a quick question? Okay. Just a couple other things about the ACT and SAT. Colleges are going to look at those best scores that the student submits. It is the student's responsibility to send those test scores. And one of the things that sometimes tripped students up this past year is that as these deadlines start to come quicker and quicker in the beginning of their senior year, many of these deadlines now are being moved up to November 1st, or November 15th, or December 1st. A completed application at many schools means that the test scores, a test score, is there by the deadline. Indiana is a perfect example. So for Indiana's early notification filing period, if the student doesn't have a test score on file, they won't be considered for that early notification period, which ties them into scholarship opportunities. So I caution students that want to hold on to those test scores and not send those to schools and wait for the last minute. And it typically takes about 3 to 4 weeks for those to be submitted to the school. So I want to let you know that, and let our juniors know last week when I talked to them, so that you're thinking ahead about submitting those test scores in time to have a completed application. I put a few slides up here just in terms of test structure and format regarding the ACT and the SAT. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but the SAT was revised last year. It used to be an aptitude test, an ultimate achievement test, mirroring more of the feel of the ACT. But certainly very different in terms of the score range. The ACT is out of 36. The SAT is out of 1600. It has 2 sections, evidence-based reading and writing, and math. I would recommend that when your son or daughter takes either the ACT or the SAT, that they take at least one with writing, because you don't know if they're going to apply to a school that will require the writing, and you certainly wouldn't want to have them go back and take one of these tests just to be able to submit that writing piece. So not having identified those particular schools that your son or daughter might apply to, I would highly encourage you to make sure that they have one ACT or an SAT with writing. Just a couple of other statistics regarding the ACT and the new SAT. Again, you can see I even put up their time per question. You get a little bit more time on the SAT. In terms of sending those scores, the SAT allows you to do something called score choice policy, so you can decide which scores you'd like to send. If you don't choose score choice policy, you will send all of your SAT scores, while the ACT allows you to decide by date which one you would like to send. Here's a testing schedule. I had some juniors last week when I was presenting asked what would be a good testing schedule. I think it was a great question. Some of you may have already started this process of testing. My initial thought with testing is typically to wait for the second semester of the junior year. The only reason that I say that is because of the importance, again, if we go back to the first couple slides, of the transcript, and allowing those students to really concentrate on their academic schedule in that first semester and to build that strong GPA. Now, I know there's certainly students that have started this process already, and that's certainly fine. But I think there's plenty of time to start this process in the second semester. If you look at the dates that are up there, if a student wanted to take the ACT or SAT 2 or 3 times, there's plenty of time to do this either in the junior year or certainly in the beginning of that senior year, where there'll be opportunities in September and October to take either of those tests again, and still have plenty of opportunities to increase those scores. Do I think it's important to take it more than once? I do. I think that certainly after you take it the first time, many students are familiarizing themselves with those tests, and I see a benefit certainly of taking it a couple of times. So I think you need to take it 7 or 8 or 9 times. Absolutely not. Statistically, we don't see a huge gain if you're going to take it that many times. And again, you have to remember at what expense, if you're going to do that, something's going to give. I remember a story a few years ago when I was working with a family, and this mom called me up and said, I'm thinking about dropping I'd like to have a conversation about dropping the 4th level of Spanish for my daughter. And I said, why would you want to do that? Just, talk to me a little bit about what's going on. And as we started to talk, the mom said, well, to be honest, her test prep tutor thought that this was really too much in terms of what she's taking on right now. With all this test prep that she has, that she should really think about dropping Spanish. This would give her a little bit more time to concentrate on prepping for the ACT. Now again, knowing what we know, knowing the statistics that are out there in terms of how important that transcript is, I said that's absolutely ludicrous. She needs to cut back on that test prep. So I think you just need to have that balance. Is it important? Is it a part of the college admission process? Without a doubt. But I think you have to think about that balance between test prep and everything else that the student is doing. We have some great test prep options here at Glenbrook South. I know there's some great test prep options out there in the community, But these are the ones that we offer here. We offer our SAT that's going to begin in January, and then ACT test prep that will begin in February. These are offered at Glenbrook South. You have a handout with you that's also available on our website. If you go to our college and career website, feel free to access that. We partner with One-to-One Learning Center. It's a non-profit organization, and that's why we partner with them. They charge, I believe right now it's $385 for 10 sessions. We offer that on Saturdays and Sundays here at Glenbrook South. It's a great program. It's going to start on the 21st of January and the 22nd. So again, if you're interested in that program, you can go to our website or you can Google One-to-One Learning Center, and I would highly encourage you to take a look at what they offer. And then we've got some wonderful free test prep. Naviance Test Prep, which is available on every student's Naviance account. They can access that. That's another great tool. We pay for that as a district. And we offer that to our students. And then Khan Academy has world-class free test prep. In fact, you can even link your PSAT scores to that, prescribe a program for you for the SAT if you're interested in that. So Khan has done a great job in providing free test prep for the SAT. So if you're not familiar with Khan Academy, I would encourage you to get online and take a look at that. The essay. Another big piece of probably thing that holds up all college applications as we move into the fall. And I talked to juniors about this last week. It's okay to start this process in the summer. You don't have to wait till the fall to start writing some of these essays, or at least starting the process. Last year, the Common Application didn't change their prompts. And I would guess that in about January, February, March, you'll know again whether or not the Common Application is going to change it for the next year. So if a student is going to apply for the Common Application, they can get on very soon and start to look at that. Now, would I advise them to do that, in the next 3 or 4 months? No. But over the summer, when they have a little bit more time and they may not be quite as stressed out, I would highly encourage them to take a look at some of those prompts. The University of California system just overhauled all of their questions. I doubt they're going to probably do that again. So they can get online and look at those questions as well. So I think that takes some of the stress out in terms of that process. We do a great job here of offering a lot of resources in the fall. We hire a writing consultant that comes back. He's a retired English teacher, and he works with students and helping them generate topics as well as editing. We also have tutors down in TLC that help with editing. Students will have help also in their English classes next year. So we provide a lot of help. Just in terms of this, I put down a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight when they talk about the college essay. I think the biggest trap sometimes that students fall into is they don't allow the essay to be enough of a reflective piece. Having been in college admissions and certainly talking with my colleagues in college admissions, the thing, again, that they want to see in that college essay is they want to see a reflective piece. And oftentimes, students get caught up with talking about an experience and continue to talk too much about that experience and not be enough self-reflective about that experience. And so I really encourage them to think about that. And sometimes, if you're, over the summer, they have a little bit more time to do that. They're not as stressed out. So again, some of the things that college admission officers have told me, insight into what makes you tick. We want to see the students step off the page. Okay? This is a great article. I'm just going to give you a quick second to read this. But if you haven't read anything by Frank Bruni, he's a wonderful writer. He wrote a book called Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, which is a great read if you have an opportunity. I would highly encourage you to read it. And I'll give you just a minute to read this, but this particular article was kind of aimed at the time when there was a lot of talk about very affluent families that were maybe starting their own organizations to allow for students to have these particular opportunities. And kind of perpetuating this idea that you had to have these out-of-world experiences to get into these selective schools. And the article is great because there's a lot of selective admission officers that talk about this experience. And a lot of them say, you don't need to go to Botswana or Africa and have these experiences. You can go to your local YMCA and have that same kind of impact on society. And the other thing I think that this does is, again, it talks about that reflective piece. So often sometimes students go on these experiences and then they come back and they'll talk to me and I'll say, so what did you learn from that? Well, I learned how fortunate I am, to live where I live. And that's not necessarily what they're looking for when we talk about that reflective piece. So this is a great article to get to Harvard. Go to Haiti, Google it. It's a really short read. But if you're not following Frank Bruni, I think he has some great articles on the college process. And again, the why versus the what. This goes into the extracurricular piece. College admission professionals, they want to see depth. And I think this is a great quote from Jim Bach, who is at Swarthmore, which is a highly selective school in the East Coast. But he really talks about, and this is a big movement for a lot of schools. In fact, they start to limit the number of activities that you can even put on the common application. Let's talk about that. Because they don't want students to think that you need a laundry list of activities to get into these schools. It's more about depth. And when I talked to our students last week, I talked about that word depth. Depth in what you do. Are you moving that club forward? Are you moving into a leadership position within the clubs and organizations that you're involved in? It can be 1 or 2. It doesn't need to be 10. But you need to be involved and invested in what you're doing. And that's more important than having a variety of different activities on your list when you apply to colleges. The teacher versus counselor letter of recommendation. The counselor's going to write about that global perspective of your son or daughter. They're going to write about some of those issues that they might have had outside of school or academically within the school. As you start to approach the teacher letter of recommendation, it's really, and I talked to, again, students last week about this, take a teacher that can write anecdotally about you. That's the word I hear time and time again from admission officers. Pick a teacher that can write anecdotally about you. I can tell a story about who you are as a student. It doesn't necessarily have to be the class that you got a straight A in. It could be a class that you really struggled in. But is there a story to be told about what you did in that particular class? That's the best piece of advice that I can give to our students in terms of identifying those teachers to write that letter of recommendation. So the 5 Ps. I'm going to go over this really quickly. If you're kind of thinking about where do I start this process, what are some things that I should be thinking about? I like this idea of the 5 Ps. Preferences, program, place, people, and price. This is a great place to get started. So as you start to think about preferences, size, do you think you want a large school? Or do you think you want maybe a small school? There's a big difference between walking onto the campus of Michigan State and walking onto the campus of Ripon College. Where your class at Michigan State might be 200-300 or more. At Ripon College, you're going to be looking at classes of 10 to 20. Activities. All schools offer a variety of different activities. Some are going to be more robust than others. If you're looking for that sorority or fraternity scene, some schools might not even have that. Some schools are going to have a larger performing arts program. So if that's a preference, make sure you're thinking about that. Athletics. Some of our students will be recruited athletes. Okay? If you are a Division I athlete or Division II athlete, you should be filling out that NCAA eligibility in the spring of your junior year. So if you have a son or daughter that's going to be a potential Division I or Division II athlete, they should start that clearinghouse process now as we move into the spring and submit a transcript to the NCAA clearinghouse. And if you want to talk further about that, we certainly can. As we talk about programs, there are some students that know exactly what they want to do. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to go into pre-med. And there are certainly schools that have stronger programs than others. Some schools that don't even have that program. And we don't necessarily expect that every student that comes into our office knows exactly what they want to do. But if they do, that could be another great place to start. Certainly engineering, University of Illinois and Carnegie Mellon have great programs. As we look at the fine arts, Oberlin College and Lawrence have conservatories on campus. Honors programs are another great thing that I think sometimes are underutilized or even thought about as we start to look at schools. Arizona State. I was out in Arizona State a couple of years ago. And I think one of the reasons that they have pushed the counselors out to their campus is to change the view of Arizona State. And then you laugh because I know exactly what you're thinking. And you know, as I walked around the campus, I was blown away by the facilities and the opportunities that students could have there. Their honors program is one of the top honors programs in the country, by far. The Barrett Honors Program is an amazing program. 96% of the students are in the top 10% of their class. In fact, they're Fulbright Scholars, which is, again, another way to measure the quality of schools. But the number of Fulbright Scholars that they produce every year is typically 4th or 5th on the list of all the schools that put out Fulbright Scholars. Typically right behind Harvard, Yale, and all the Ivy League schools that you might be able to mention. So there's some great opportunities out there that I think are definitely worth investigating when you start to think about a student that might be in that, you know, that top 10% that has options at a lot of different schools. When you start to talk about merit money, and you start to talk about the opportunity to be in a Research One institution that have the feel of a small liberal arts college, and it is truly self-contained. Their honors program at Arizona State. The students have their own dining hall, they have their own dorms, they have their own classes. It's a wonderful experience. So it's important, I think, again, to just look at the different opportunities that are out there. And I just put a few of some of the top honors programs in the country up there. Special programs. Illinois Wesleyan has something called a 3-2 engineering program, where you spend 3 years at Illinois Wesleyan and you earn your BA. And if you earn a certain GPA that they give you as a cutoff, you automatically have an opportunity to finish up 2 years at WashU, which is one of the top engineering programs in the country, and earn a BS in engineering. So there's some special programs out there, like these 3-2 programs. There's some directed medical programs, like Union College 8-year medical program with Albany Medical College. So again, if you have some specific things that you want to talk to me about in terms of those programs, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Have a family discussion about location, in-state, out-of-state, commuting versus living on campus. Urban versus, there's certainly different urban environments that we can look at: Columbia, DePaul, George Washington. Or does your son or daughter want to look at a suburban school like Pepperdine, Northwestern, Butler? Pepperdine would be really nice on a day like today. Rural school like University of New Hampshire, Grinnell, University of Illinois. So to just look at some of these different types of settings. Do they have a preference for those settings? Cultural diversity. A school like Augustana, where 76% of the student body is Caucasian, versus at UCLA, where 64% of the student body are students of color. And geographic diversity. I think sometimes students don't think about geographic diversity. At a school like University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, 90% of the student body is from Wisconsin, but if you look at Denison University, 78% of the students are from out of state. 8% are from foreign countries. So is that important to meet students from all over the country? Financial aid. So the last one certainly is price. And that's the one most of you will be concerned with. And we'll do a lot more programming in terms of financial aid. But I do want to bring just a few things up. The net price calculator is a wonderful opportunity if you want to start to get some ballpark figures in terms of what the university or college might cost. Every school is required to have a net price calculator on their website. Some are more experienced than others, but if you type in net price calculator, it'll take you to the net price calculator. And you can fill out some financials, and it will give you an estimate of what that school might cost you. And I think it's really, really important that you start to kind of get an idea so that you can talk to your son or daughter about what those parameters are in terms of the schools that they might be looking at. There's a FAFSA forecaster that you can also use, although I think I like the net price calculator better. They have moved back financial aid, so now you'll be using 2 years in the rear taxes. That's a change this past year. And the FAFSA will be filled out starting in October instead of later in the year like it used to be out in January. Okay, so that's a big change as well. So just, again, not doing much of that now, but just so that you're prepared for those changes. The CSS profile is another, in the FAFSA are 2 of the forms that you will fill out. The CSS profile, some private schools also require that in addition to the FAFSA to be filled out for financial aid purposes. But if you're going to apply for financial aid, all of you will have to fill out the FAFSA. Price. When we start thinking about price, we want to start thinking about scholarships. This past year, I just read an article that Alabama gave out $100 million in merit-based scholarships. There are schools out there that are out-of-state schools that are starting to put a lot of money into American scholarships to attract students from Illinois, because they know that students from Illinois are starting to look out of state. 50% of our students are going out of state. And so, there are schools in a variety of different parts of this country that are starting to attract our students using merit-based scholarships. And it's important as you start to look at this process to decide, is that important to me in terms of some of those scholarships? Raise.me is another source of micro scholarships. Your son or daughter can sign up for a Raise.me account. They can start accumulating micro scholarships. It's not a lot, but it's, they can accrue up to $4,000 or $5,000 over the course of their career for taking AP classes, for getting A's in AP classes, and a variety of different categories. This is funded by the William Gates Foundation, as well as the colleges themselves. These are some different micro scholarships. So I would take a look at Raise.me as well. And then grants and loans and work study and outside employment are other things that can bring the cost of a institution down. So as you start to look at that cost, the net price calculator will let you know, where exactly some of that other money might come. As you start to look at some of these private schools that might be a little bit more expensive. And again, we'll do a lot more programming in terms of financial aid as we go along. If you're having problems getting started and you don't know where to go, I would suggest some of the local options that I put up here. In other words, you could go to Lake Forest College and get an idea of what a National Liberal Arts College looks like. And you don't have to go all the way out to Maine to visit Colby. No, the setting's going to be a little different. It's a little more beautiful at Colby College in terms of the landscape. But Lake Forest is pretty, sits on near the lake. It's a very beautiful campus. But it's great just to take your son or daughter to some of these campuses and say, what do you think? Do you like this small school? You can sit in on a class. It's a great opportunity just to get the feel. Or you can take them down to DePaul and see if they like that urban center. Is that something that or down to University of Illinois to see if they like that large public. So there's a lot of things that you can be doing to start this process. Campus visits, a must. So my advice to juniors last week when I met with them, identify 10 to 15 schools that you start to research between now and June. Try to get on as many campuses as you can. And I know this is difficult because everyone has schedules. And the college schedule, it typically ends about the second week of May. So there's not a lot of time. So you really need to start identifying these schools and finding those times, whether it be spring break or whether it be a holiday that we have here that maybe college doesn't have, and get on those campuses when there's students on those campuses. I can't tell you how many times a student has come into my office when they ask me, how'd you decide on that school? I felt right on that campus. When I walked around that campus, it just felt right for me. I think the more campuses that you can get your students on, the better off they'll be as they start to make some of these decisions and decide what's right for them. And it's as simple as calling the admissions office and kind of asking them to, set up a visit for you, allow you to sit in a class, talk to a professor, visit the career placement office. I think it's so important to sit down in the career placement office. I get questions all the time from parents about, who recruits at these schools. I can't keep track of 2,000 schools and who recruits at each of these schools. But the placement offices do. It's their job. And you should ask those questions. What percentage of your students are getting placed in the field that they're majoring in within 6 months? And if they rush you through the career placement office, then you probably don't want to look at that school. Okay? You should want to spend time there. Some of the best college visits that I've had, they sat us down in that career placement office and they didn't budge. They talked and talked and talked. Okay? And that's impressive. The other thing that I would really encourage you to do is when you go on these tours, they set you up with these ambassadors. They train these ambassadors to make sure that they highlight all the nice parts of work in the college admission. I don't know what the ambassadors. We make sure that they take the tour, it takes you through all the nice buildings, they show you the nice dorm room, that's all set up with pottery barn fixings. And unfortunately, those aren't the rooms that you're living in the first year. I always suggest students get off the beaten path. Pull a student aside that's walking down the path and just ask them quick questions like, what are the top 3 things that you really like about this school? What are the 3 things that you really want to change about this school? What other schools did you apply to? Ask some of those quick questions of people other than those tour guides that give you kind of those canned tours. As we start to move into the senior year, I put this picture up there because we really need to start working on narrowing the search. I talked to some seniors this year as late as November and just a couple weeks ago. And I'm troubled sometimes when students come in and we're trying to build a list this time of the year. There's so much to be done. There's so much research to be done on these schools. There's deadlines to be met. And as I said before, more and more schools are trying to move their deadlines up to November 1st and December 1st and tying them into scholarship opportunities. So it's really, really important that when students come back in August, beginning of September, that they narrow this search, again, to 6 to 8 schools, so that they can keep track of everything that they're going to need to do in this application process. The students that are stressed out the most are those students that have 20, 30 different schools. They don't know if they sent their ACT score here, or whether or not this school needs a Common App or institutional app. And I don't remember if I asked this teacher to write a letter for that school or this school. And it gets very convoluted if you haven't narrowed that search. And so I really, really highly would recommend that you come back in the fall with a narrowed search. I included this in the back of your packet. This is the application management chart that I created as a guide. You may want to come up with one of your own, but I think when you start to look at all the things that students have to keep track of as they go along in this process, that this would be a great thing to have. And this is also in the document folder in Naviance too. So students can print this off and they can use this, but I also give you a copy on the back of that handout so that you have that. But I would highly encourage you to use something like this as they start that process in the fall. Does it look like this sometimes when you're trying to get messages across? So again, I want this process to be one that's enjoyable. And I think, I can't tell you how many times, I'll have parents in my office with students, and that's what I like to do. I like to meet with both the parents and the students, and I would encourage all of you to make an appointment with me over the next few months. I take appointments from now until June. I meet with families, and I help families construct lists, and I help them identify potential schools that they should be looking at. But one of the things I think you need to do is set those parameters before you come into the office. Sometimes I'll have those conversations, and it's like we're on two different worlds here in terms of what the student wants and what the parent wants. And so I think it's important to start having some of those talks now, so that you set some of those parameters, and so that this process becomes one that isn't a stressed out process, but one that's enjoyable, that gives you some time to spend with your son or daughter, exploring some great colleges and universities around this country. Because I know as you start to think, this is a 6P, by the way, this is my princess. And how quickly does it go from that to this? And that's going to happen. And again, I think if you start early and you follow some of the things that we talked about tonight, this will not be as stressful as the process I think that sometimes people make it out to be. Appreciate your time tonight. And I will leave this open for questions if anybody wants to stick back. And I think if you have questions, you're free to leave, but if you have questions and you want to ask them, go ahead and ask them so the rest of the folks here. And I